Hi, my name is Lenore von Stein, and this is an episode of The Facts. And with me tonight is Bern, Andrew Bolotowsky, Rachel Evans, and Beth Griffith. And this episode I'm setting in the far future, like 1,000 years from now. And I'm doing that because I was thinking, what is a safe way to discuss corruption and corporate crime? And so either, you do this kind of like from the viewpoint of the future or from the past, like Shakespeare.
The stereotype around drugs is either you're a lazy couch potato stoner eating Doritos, right? Or you're out, finding your fix, all this stuff. But think, the last 3 presidents of the United States are all drug users. Obama said not only did he smoke weed, he tried coke when he could afford it. President Bush would never answer his youthful indiscretions. My youthful indiscretions when I was 40. So I mean, Bill Clinton had his famous answer. I inhaled, but I smoked, but I didn't inhale it. But the point is, many successful people, from Michael Phelps and the athletes to leading scientists, Carl Sagan, to presidents, to elected officials. You can't even find an elected official now who says they haven't tried marijuana. And so the point is that people around our society do take drugs, but the stereotype, the image, and who's getting punished and incarcerated is mostly poor people. Poor African Americans, Latinos are the ones filling our jail cells because of their drug use, and that's something we all have to think about. I want all of us who are watching this show think about what drugs either do you use, someone in your family use, and would anyone want them or their family members to be locked in a cage because they have a drug problem?
How can I judge? There is so much I don't know, and I don't want to take the time.
The central character in this story is named Palau. And that's a takeoff on the name of a beautiful island, which I'm pretending disappears in 2300 from global warming. But by year 3000, which is when this story is set, it's being faithfully reconstructed in the same place with the same topography to stabilize the weather, to the currents, animal life, regreen the earth.
What physicians would really like to be able to do is to sort of narrow the possible responses that people have to drugs. You prescribe a painkiller. Okay. Some people, the painkiller works. Some people, it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people, you have to give it at higher dosages than others. But you only know this after the fact, after you have prescribed the drug. I mean, particularly in the case where a drug doesn't work, that there may be some price after you stop taking it, which is the case I had with, I was taking Cymbalta. I was taking Cymbalta for neuropathy, which is tingling or loss of sensation in your extremities, like your fingers or your feet. So I was taking Cymbalta for that. Cymbalta used to be used, well, still being used to treat depression. Okay. So you sort of taper into using Cymbalta. You take one for a couple of days, and you take it twice a day, and then you build up to the dosage that you're going to be maintained on for a while. And in my case, I had to stop taking it because it wasn't doing anything for my neuropathy. You come off of it, and a very common thing to happen after you've stopped taking it is you get severely depressed. Okay. Now, if you were able to know in advance, first of all, whether the drug would work, and then if you were able to know in advance that the person would not go into a severe depression afterwards, wouldn't you like that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you can only do that on the basis of the individual you are prescribing it to. If you could find a drug that you could be sure on the basis of particularly of genetic information that you could get on the person, that it will have a particular effect, you can match the genetics to the actual tailoring of the drug, and the effect would be a personalized drug.
what is a drug? I mean, how can you have that glass of wine and not understand what a drug is, not understand what the effect of a drug is? I mean, you know what the effect of a drug is. Character Palau is 210 years old, and she's fully healthy, fully alive. She grew up in this boxy apartment looking over at the sea, and the earth is very crowded because people, a lot of people, and a lot of them are living to be very old, but all the housing is healthy, the power is renewable and free, people move often, healthcare, education, transportation is free, and many lousy jobs, like jobs with repetitive labor or cleaning, these are done by machines. So how do drugs relieve stress? Those drugs that relieve stress, how do they relieve stress?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. One is actually affecting the balance of neurotransmitters in the brain. So that's in effect sort of it modulates them. And you can do that a couple of different ways. One is by, there are a number of neurotransmitters that go through a cycle, and then you can intervene in the cycle so that they don't get taken back again and recycled. Then you can modulate the way that the body is responding. You can do it by simply inhibiting the stress response, stress response is fairly non-specific. Anything could provoke it.
So you can sort of block that stress?
Yeah. And you can do that by manipulating these neurotransmitters, or intervening at particular points in the stress response. There's an area of the brain called the hypothalamus, which a lot of this is regulated by through the hypothalamus to adrenal glands. Adrenal glands is basically what sets you off. The adrenaline is a source of energy that activates the stress response, which is basically it's a fight or flight response. It's a response to immediate danger.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So if you can block that happening, then you block the entire stress response. So that's one way you can do it. Another way is you can do it, but basically the way alcohol does it, which is by having it work as a area that depresses activity in the back part of the brain. Alcohol is a back brain depressant.
You mean depressant, literally like sits on it or something?
No, if you can imagine, for example, you have a container, got lots of sparks going through it. If you can do anything that lessens the activity that's in there, lessens the degree of stimulation, and then you in fact are depressing the activity that's there. The psychological aspect of it, is once you get to a certain level of that loss of activity and loss of stimulation. But you can have it without that. So what you actually are doing is lessening the stimulation And in fact, one of the things people often forget is that aside from controlling stuff that goes in to your brain also depends on feedback. So if you can interfere with the feedback loop, you can actually begin to shut down certain kinds of activities going on in your brain. And something like alcohol does that.
It's often described in drug mythology, you know, that you're feeling so much more, that you're so much more awake. And I thought that was very strange because it seems to me I'm feeling less. You know, I'm happy to feel less. I don't want to feel more, but I'm not feeling more. So back to this, or leading to the central issue at this point in the story. So people are sexually active all their lives, healthy, getting married, you know, they live to be 200, 300, Palau's 210. Many people are bald in this story, you know, because hair is something we don't really need, you know, so it's going to go. And so the trauma of these multiple breakups, it's a big problem affecting people's ability to trust each other, to open up, and to enjoy each other. Palau is a musician, and she writes music, and this is what she's writing about, this inability to trust people, and to make, and how to...
Whatever you've seen and felt, you've seen and felt. You can say Shiloh. There's only one human species on this planet. Be thou.
Is it simply, you know, that it's more available in some places, or is there, you know, one drug that kind of makes you logy and one drug that makes you, you know, speed down the road, or is it that it's something about the situation, or that makes one a drug of choice and one not a drug of choice?
You do see these kind of cycles of new drugs and new, you know, I remember when I was, a number of years ago, it was the ecstasy. Ecstasy was everywhere, and it was like, you know, it was the cover of all the magazines, and this is the new thing. And then, you know, again, none of these drugs ever go away, but, you know, there's just kind of like these cycles. And then in meth now was a huge thing, and meth is everywhere, and so, I mean, there's a few things to think about. One is the way the media talks about a lot of these things. The media can get very hyped up, and almost, here's a funny example. There's this stuff like K2, you know, alternative. You say marijuana is illegal, right? So chemists and stuff figure out how to make something that has marijuana-like effects, but it's not illegal. So because marijuana is illegal, we drive people to do even unhealthier kind of chemical stuff because of our, you know, that's the result of prohibition. So now we're driving people to try to, but no one is, you know, no one's doing it. So then the media gets hyped on something. The K2 is everywhere, and your kids are going to be doing this and at the stores. And it's amazing. They turn something that, salvia, these drugs that no one has ever tried before, and the media thing kind of hypes it up. So for the first time, you know, so was there a lot of ecstasy use in the you know, in the early 2000s? You know, in certain communities, yes. You know, the media that hypes up a lot of this stuff, is there some media kind of fuel that makes it seem like it's everywhere and stuff? Yes. And then some of it cycles out naturally, just, you know, things like almost like fads, things come and go and stuff. But what it doesn't, is what it's not related to, is like amped up new laws. You know, it's like these laws that kind of come and we're gonna like crack down and do that stuff. That actually is not what influences drug use. There's more of these natural cycles, but what happens is once these kind of laws get locked in, they can have consequences for many decades.
So in this future that I'm imagining, the things that, many of the things that were impeding people have been broken away, and the full person is about to break through, but hasn't quite made it. And Palau's work, she's trying to explore this poignant, pregnant state, and a personality about to be born under wraps, but just thinner wraps than in the past. And aspects of this, of the wariness that people have with each other, of the care in which they take approaching each other, and the amounts of themselves that they show, these have been codified for many centuries now, and by this time in fine and popular art, and these works supply sympathy and to the audience, comradeship, but they have not really moved the mountain.
The unscientific, explanations that and hysteria that can get whipped up in the media can lead to elected officials making these laws that take decades to undo.
And there's another aspect to the whole drug of choice question, there's a couple of assumptions, simply built into the question.
Yeah.
One is that there's a choice. Sometimes when you see sort of a switch that occurs, it's because something that people are usually taking are no longer available, and the people that they get it from got something else to sell now.
I see.
That happens. You have that kind of situation. Then, of course, there are people who actually do have a choice, and they prefer some drugs over others. It's sort of an aesthetic and experiential thing for them. And depending on what their preference is, they may have to go through a lot to get that. Particularly if it's something that's not readily available. But I was in some black community in Baltimore in the early 80s, in Newark in the 70s. And, there were some things that you just couldn't get. If I wanted to get mescaline in Newark, I couldn't get mescaline. I couldn't get it. Nobody was using it. Nobody was selling it. I could get heroin very easily. To snort or shoot up. Easy, because a lot of people were selling it. The beginning of the 80s, when crack was coming in, because it came in gradually in Newark and in Baltimore. But once it got in there, it was a thing. It was really explosive. And I was there. The kind of drugs, like the party drugs, that wasn't happening in Newark. So part of it is like what is actually available to you and how it gets to you. Aside from whatever your preference is. There was a definite divide between people who were into heroin and people who were into cocaine, because cocaine's a stimulant. And heroin isn't.
we talk about, you talk about the same drug, right? And we think about meth, right? And you have an image, and like you said, it's all these people in the Midwest, and they're all strung out on it, right? At the same time, Ritalin is on every college campus in this country. You have students who stay up and they take Ritalin to help them with their studying. And so it's another interesting question of like, they're both speed, right? Is it Ritalin and that, straight A honor students are taking Ritalin and someone else is taking meth, but we can have such a different image of who that person is.
Something very straightforward like the crack versus cocaine, the amount of time that's given, the population that's being targeted.
The first part of the transition I see is from viewing, well, let's look specifically at addictive drugs as opposed to all the other ones. Okay. The most serious thing there would be to stop viewing drug addiction as a state of criminality, and to view it instead as a medical problem, which is treatable, but which also has a variety of components to it. So you just go back to why some people are using drugs that addict them in the first place. So there's a psychological aspect to this, and also a social one, because of the way that people's social position, what race they are, who their ancestors were, what they look like, how those things impact on them to the point where they would have access to and then actually go out and purchase drugs that addict them.
And so the future, ladies and gentlemen, looks very bright to me. And so as we waggle off,
I really want.
good. So see, I hope you catch us online, whatever, see you around. Good night.